The first time I saw Ethan Reed after 6 years, he was standing in the center of my office like he still owned everything he touched. Tall, polished, and dangerous in that quiet billionaire way, he hadn't changed much, except maybe the sharpness behind his storm-colored eyes. He was still magnetic. Still infuriating. And still the man who ruined me. I didn't invite him to sit. He didn't wait to be asked. "I need a wife," he said, like he was ordering coffee. I arched an eyebrow. "Then go propose to your reflection. I hear you two are close." His mouth twitched like he might smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's a legal requirement. My grandfather left a clause in his will, if I'm not married by the end of this fiscal year, I lose everything." "And you came to me?" I laughed, bitter and amused. "Out of all the women in the city, you thought I'd jump at the chance to play pretend?" "I thought you'd appreciate the opportunity to set your own terms," he said. "You're not the same girl I left behind." "No," I said. "She learned to survive." He didn't flinch. "It's a 1-year arrangement. Strictly business. I'll wire $25 million to your account upon signing, and another 25 when we divorce. In the meantime, you'll have full access to my homes, staff, jets. You think I care about jets?" I cut in. "Do you think money fixes everything you broke?" "No," he said. "But maybe power does." He slid a folder across my desk. The contract was already drafted. My name already typed in. I picked it up with steady hands, flipping through clause after clause of carefully worded legal chains. And for some reason, I smiled. "You want a wife?" I asked. "Fine. But we do it my way." He tilted his head. "Go on. We live together. Appearances matter, right? That's expected. You don't get to touch me unless I initiate it." "Fine. We attend all public events together. You smile, you compliment me, you act like the man you should have been. If that's what it takes. And every month, I get to change one rule. No questions asked." He paused. That one made him think. Agreed. I stood and extended my hand. He took it. His grip was cool and composed, but there was something under the surface, some tension neither of us acknowledged. 1 year, I said. Then we go our separate ways. 1 year, he echoed. The wedding was a spectacle. Paparazzi swarmed the chapel like vultures, eager to see the ice-hearted CEO tie the knot with a woman they barely remembered. But inside that gold-trimmed room, I stood in silk and secrets, watching Ethan Reed promise forever with the same mouth that once told me I'd never be enough. He looked at me like he didn't recognize what I'd become. That made 2 of us. Our first night as husband and wife was spent in his penthouse suite. We slept in separate rooms. I closed my door with a click, slid the lock into place, and stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of what this arrangement might stir up. Because Ethan had always been dangerous, not for what he did to me, but for how easily I used to let him. In public, we played the part. He held open doors. Kissed the back of my hand. Posed beside me like we were the city's golden couple. But behind the curtain, the tension was colder. Controlled. I'd built walls. So had he. And neither of us was willing to be the first to crack. But the thing about walls is, sometimes the pressure inside starts to build. We attended his company's winter gala together, arm in arm, smiling for flashing cameras. I wore a backless black gown he'd had delivered that morning. "You chose this?" I asked when he appeared at my door. "Figured it matched your aura," he said. "Unapproachable and lethal." "Careful," I said, adjusting my earrings. "You're starting to sound like the man who used to know me." "I remember everything," he said, quietly. I ignored the flicker in my chest. The evening was a success. The press loved our chemistry. Investors whispered about how Ethan Reed had finally settled down. But in the car ride home, silence stretched between us like glass. "You never apologized," I said suddenly. He turned his head. "For what?" "For leaving me to drown when your reputation was on the line. For making me look like a desperate fool." He didn't look away. "Would you believe me if I said I regretted it every day since?" "No, didn't think so." We arrived at the penthouse. I stepped out without waiting for him, climbed the stairs, and poured myself a glass of wine. A minute later, he appeared in the doorway. "Why did you say yes?" he asked. "You could have burned the contract. Sent me packing. But you didn't." I swirled the wine. "Because it's time you learned what it feels like to dance on strings you don't control." His jaw tightened. He stepped forward, then paused. You've changed. Good. I turned my back on him. That's what pain does. But what I didn't say was this: underneath the contract, the cold words, the perfect revenge, something old and dangerous was starting to wake up. And that scared me more than anything. The second month began with a rule change. Ethan was halfway through reading the Financial Times at the breakfast table when I placed a folded slip of paper beside his espresso cup. He glanced at it, then at me. "You're early," he said. "I have meetings," I replied, sliding on a pair of black heels. "And I'm invoking this month's rule." He set the paper down and unfolded it. His eyes scanned the single sentence. His lips parted slightly, then pressed into a line. "You want full access to my calendar," he said. I sipped my coffee. "I'm your wife. Shouldn't I know where you are at all times?" That wasn't in the original terms. But it is now. He didn't argue. He just nodded once and said, "You'll have it by noon." That was the thing about Ethan, he never wasted words. And that was the thing about me, I'd learned how to make them count. I didn't care where he went. Not really. What I cared about was reminding him that he'd handed me control. That every month, with every new rule, I was taking pieces of him. Small, sharp ones, and keeping them. And yet, somehow, despite all the reminders, he never flinched. Later that week, we hosted a private dinner for the board members of Reed Enterprises. A dozen power-hungry executives with $1,000 watches and careful smiles. I played the charming wife. The one with elegance, wit, and teeth sharp enough to draw blood if provoked. Ethan watched me across the table like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. When one of the older board members commented on how well I'd adapted to the Reed lifestyle, Ethan's hand brushed my back. "She's always been exceptional," he said, voice low. I blinked. That word, always. As if he remembered who I used to be before he shattered me. After the last guest left, I moved toward the bedroom. Ethan followed, his footsteps quiet on the marble floors. "Why did you take my calendar?" he asked. "Because I wanted to remind you," I said, "that this is my game. And if I don't like the rules? You shouldn't have come to me." He stepped closer. The space between us shrank like air being pulled from a room. "You're not the same girl I left." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "I'm worse." And yet, he didn't step back. He stared like he wanted to say something. Like maybe there was something he couldn't bury. Instead, he turned away and said, "The press wants a couple's interview. They're requesting something unscripted." I raised an eyebrow. "Unscripted?" "They want authenticity. Real connection. Then they should interview a real couple. They want us." I considered it. "Fine. But I choose the location." The interview was set for the following Thursday. I picked a library downtown. Dim lights, velvet chairs, walls lined with old books. A quiet contrast to the glitz of Ethan's world. When the cameras rolled, I smiled sweetly and crossed my legs. Ethan sat beside me, effortlessly poised. We answered questions like professionals. How we met, what drew us together, what marriage had taught us. Then the interviewer asked, "What surprised you most about each other after the wedding?" I spoke first. "He listens more than I expected," I said, eyes flicking to him. Though he rarely admits it. "And her?" the interviewer asked Ethan. His answer was immediate. "She's colder than I remember." The air between us shifted. I tilted my head. "And yet you came back." He looked at me for a long moment. I suppose I needed to feel the frostbite to understand what I lost. There it was, just a crack. But it was enough. The cameras caught it. The silence that lingered afterward. The tension that curled into something neither of us could name. That night, I found a small box on my vanity. Inside was a pen, gold-plated, engraved with my initials. Ethan never mentioned it. I never thanked him. But I used it to draft next month's rule. Week by week, our arrangement blurred. Public appearances became easier. Laughter slipped into conversations without permission. One morning, he made me breakfast, burnt toast, undercooked eggs. He didn't comment when I threw it out and made my own, but he watched me the whole time like I'd performed magic. I was still winning. But sometimes, I couldn't tell if I was pulling him in, or if he was slowly drawing me back. One night, after a charity gala, we returned to the penthouse past midnight. I kicked off my heels and reached for the zipper of my dress. Ethan stepped forward. "Let me," he said. I froze. But I didn't stop him. He pulled the zipper down slowly. His hands brushed my back. The air was charged, heavy. I turned to face him. Do you want to change the rules? I asked. His eyes didn't waver. No. But I'd like to know where the lines are. I stepped back. Where they've always been. Right between us. He nodded. Then I'll wait on the other side. He walked away, leaving me standing there, breath caught somewhere in my throat. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of regret, but because for the first time since this started, I wasn't sure who was really in control anymore. By the third month, people had stopped calling it a marriage of convenience. The tabloids labeled us the power couple of the year. Articles speculated about our whirlwind romance, our effortless chemistry, our matching ambition. Photos of Ethan with his hand on the small of my back flooded social media. We were perfect. On paper. But in the quiet, off-camera spaces, something else brewed. Something that couldn't be captured by flashbulbs and PR statements. The third rule came at dawn. I slid the folded note onto his nightstand while he slept. He woke to find it, opened it without a word, and met me in the kitchen an hour later. You want a weekly dinner, he said. Just us. No business. No phones. I sipped my tea. Correct. That's not really a rule. It is now. He nodded once. Which night? Thursdays. 7 sharp. He didn't argue. That Thursday, he showed up to the dining room at exactly 7, no tie, sleeves rolled, looking nothing like the man who had once been too busy to remember I existed. We ate in silence for the first few minutes. The chef had prepared seared scallops, truffle risotto, and wine neither of us commented on. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Do you remember the ramen shop near the university? I blinked. What? You used to drag me there after late lectures. Said the owner made the best broth in the city. I stared at him. I didn't know you remembered that. I remember everything, he said. Especially the way you looked when you laughed over that cracked porcelain bowl. Like you had the whole world ahead of you. I pushed my plate away. You don't get to do that. Do what? Bring up who I was. Not after what you did. His voice stayed calm. I'm not pretending I didn't mess it up. But pretending I never cared, don't, I said, sharper this time. We had a deal, Ethan. Don't rewrite the past just because you want to make peace with yourself. He looked at me for a long time before nodding once. Okay. But the words still hung in the air. Heavy. Unresolved. The next week, he brought home ramen. Not the overpriced gourmet kind, but a takeout bag from the same tiny shop. The same broth. The same cracked bowls, apparently bought off the owner just to match the memory. He didn't say anything when he handed it to me. He just set the bag on the counter and left. I hated that it made my chest ache. I hated more that I ate it alone at midnight, staring at the city lights, remembering things I had buried too deep. At the fourth Thursday dinner, I caught myself laughing at something he said. It wasn't even that funny. Just a dry comment about a board member's hair transplant and the way it shifted in strong wind. But it hit me off guard. Like old times. He smiled too, but he didn't push it. That was the most dangerous part, he never pushed. He just waited. Let me come to him. Let the silence stretch long enough for me to start unraveling. The worst part? It was working. The next event we attended was a charity auction hosted at the city's museum. I wore a deep red gown. He wore a black suit, tailored to perfection. We looked like we were in love. One of the donors leaned over and whispered, "He watches you like you hung the stars." Ethan overheard. He didn't correct the woman. Instead, when we stepped outside for air, he said, "You never ask me what I want from all this." Because I don't care. You should. Why? Because I don't want the money anymore. I turned to face him. Then what do you want? He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, I want another year. The words hit me like a slap. Not because I didn't expect them, but because I had. Somewhere deep down, I'd known this wouldn't be enough for him. You agreed to one, I said. You don't get to change the deal. Neither do you, he said, stepping closer. But that doesn't stop you from trying. I'm not trying, I said. I'm winning. He smiled, but there was no malice in it. You always do. That night, he didn't go to his room. He stayed in the living room, tie loosened, drink in hand. Watching the fireplace like it held answers he couldn't find. I watched him from the hallway, hidden, heart-thudding in ways I didn't want to name. I didn't trust him. But more than that, I didn't trust myself. Because with every rule I wrote, I was also crossing one. And if I wasn't careful, I'd forget this was all a performance. And start wanting what was never meant to be real. By month 4, my armor was cracking, and Ethan knew it. He didn't say it outright. He didn't need to. It was in the way he looked at me longer than necessary, in the way his hand hovered an inch too long on the small of my back. In the way he stopped calling this a contract in public and started calling it a marriage. I still changed the rules. That hadn't stopped. Rule 4, 1 kiss a week. Public. Controlled. For optics, I wrote. He didn't question it, only nodded. Just tell me when. So I did. The first time was at a fundraising gala. A staged photo op. A scripted moment. But the second his lips touched mine, the world stopped playing along. It was supposed to be a simple press kiss, lips barely brushing, just enough for the cameras. But he didn't rush it. His hand curled around my waist, gentle but firm, and when his mouth found mine, it wasn't cold or calculated. It was real. It made something inside me jolt awake. I pulled back first. Smoothed my dress. Smiled like I wasn't unraveling inside. That should cover the week. He didn't say a word. Just nodded once. But his eyes never left mine. Back at the penthouse, we barely spoke. I poured myself wine. He went to the balcony. I watched him through the glass doors, wondering when he'd started feeling like a habit. That night, I dreamed of the past, of long nights in dorm rooms, of whispered plans we never made real. I woke with a strange ache in my chest and Ethan asleep on the couch, one arm flung over his eyes like he couldn't bear to look at the ceiling. We were both pretending. Just not in the ways we thought. The next kiss happened during a photo shoot for a luxury travel campaign. We were in Venice. Gondola. Champagne. Sunset time to perfection. The photographer told us to hold each other. Tilt our faces closer. Like you're still surprised you ended up together. I leaned into Ethan's side, lips near his jaw. You're enjoying this too much. He murmured back, I'm just following the rules. But when he kissed me again. This time with no one telling us when to stop, his fingers tangled in my hair, and I forgot how to breathe. I was the one who pulled away again. Always. Because if I didn't, I knew I'd fall. And this was a war, not a love story. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. One night, I woke to find Ethan in the kitchen, barefoot, shirt half unbuttoned, pouring water like he couldn't sleep either. Something wrong? I asked, leaning on the doorframe. He turned. You keep pulling away. And you keep following, I said. He set the glass down. Because I want to know who I'm really married to. You knew who I was before. No, he said. I knew who I hurt. I want to know who you became. That hit harder than I expected. Why? I asked quietly. Because I like her, he said. Even if she hates me. I looked at him, truly looked at him. The same man who once walked away like I was collateral damage. But now, he stayed. I don't hate you, I admitted. He froze. I just don't forgive you. I don't expect you to, he said. I just want the chance to try again. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because deep down, I'd already given him more chances than he deserved. By the end of month 4, our Thursday dinners had become sacred. We no longer talked about rules. We just sat. Ate. Laughed. Sometimes we argued, but it was real. Not performative. Not staged. One evening, I asked him, if you hadn't needed to marry for the inheritance, would you have ever found me again? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because you're the only thing that's ever made me wish I were someone better. I hated how much I wanted to believe that. But I couldn't afford to fall into that hope. Not yet. Not when there were still 8 months left. Not when I still had a final rule waiting. One I'd been writing since the day he walked back into my life. And when the time came, it would be the one he never saw coming. By the 5th month, Ethan stopped asking questions. He didn't press when I came home late. Didn't flinch when I changed the locks to my study. Didn't even react when I rewrote Rule 5 to say, you tell me a truth each week. Something I don't know. No lies. No spin. He only asked, do I get to ask questions after? I shook my head. Just listen. The first truth came that night. He sat across from me at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled, shirt open at the collar. My father didn't want me to inherit anything. Not the company. Not the penthouse. Not even the name. I paused, surprised. He told me the company would rot if I touched it, he continued. Said I'd always be too soft. That I'd ruin everything he built. That why you became what you are. He gave a hollow laugh. I became what I am to prove him wrong. And in the process, I proved him right. I didn't respond. That wasn't part of the deal. The next week, he told me he used to check my LinkedIn profile. After I left, he said, I'd type in your name once a week. Just to see if you were still angry. Or if you disappeared completely. Why? Because I hated the idea of you moving on without hating me first. I said nothing. But my hands curled slightly under the table. Week by week, the truths kept coming. He told me about the panic attacks he used to hide in conference rooms. The first woman he dated after me, how he tried to make her laugh the same way I did. How he deleted our old photos but still remembered every single one. And yet, he never asked for forgiveness. Never tried to make excuses. He just laid the truth down, week after week, like a penance. Some nights, I wanted to scream at him. Other nights, I wanted to reach across the silence and pull him close. Instead, I rewrote myself quieter. Because the more real he became, the more unstable my control felt. We traveled for business in month 5. London, then Zurich. The suite had 1 bedroom. I took the bed. He took the couch. One night, I heard him whisper my name in his sleep. I stood in the dark, watching his chest rise and fall. Wondering how someone could haunt me from across a hotel room. The next morning, he made coffee exactly how I liked it. Handed it to me without looking. I wanted to throw it out the window. I also wanted to drink it forever. Back in New York, we hosted a press brunch. I wore cream silk and a diamond ring too big for the truth. A reporter asked how we kept the spark alive. I smiled. We tell each other the truth. Ethan glanced at me, his expression unreadable. It's the only way to survive a marriage. That night, he found me on the rooftop garden. The city stretched beneath us, golden and indifferent. You never tell me your truths, he said softly. That wasn't part of the deal. I know. I looked at him. Would you want them if they hurt? Yes. I studied him. I loved you once. He inhaled slowly, like the air had shifted. And I hate you for making me remember what that felt like. He nodded. That's fair. Neither of us moved. Then he said, I've stopped looking at the clock. What do you mean? I don't count down the months anymore. He stepped closer. And I don't think I want this to end. The wind picked up. My pulse stuttered. I whispered, it was never supposed to be real. But it is, he said. It has been since the moment you walked back into my life and didn't shatter. I looked away. I haven't forgiven you. I know. And I might never. He nodded. Then I'll stay until you do. Or until you don't. He left me on the rooftop with that promise hanging in the air like smoke. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted Rule 6 instead. It was short. 3 words. Tell me why. He'd been giving me pieces of himself for months, but now, I needed the whole thing. Needed to know what really drove him. Why he came to me. Why he stayed. What it meant now. And when he gave me that answer, I'd know what to do with what was left of us. Rule 6 changed everything. Tell me why. I handed him the note over breakfast. No preamble, no sharp smile. Just the rule and the silence that followed it. Ethan read it once, folded it slowly, and placed it back on the table like it had weight. When? He asked. Thursday, I said. Dinner. The entire week stretched like wire. Every time I passed him in the hallway, his eyes searched mine, like he was trying to guess what I wanted from his answer. What I needed it to mean. I didn't give him anything. Not a smile. Not a warning. Not even a hint. Because I wasn't sure myself. Thursday came. I wore black. He showed up to the dining room early, wine already uncorked, plates set, candles lit. For the first time since our wedding, he looked nervous. We ate quietly. Then I set my fork down and said, your turn. Ethan leaned back, expression unreadable. The day I walked into your office, he began slowly, I already knew it was you or nothing. I kept my face still. I'd gone through a list. Dozens of names. Models. Diplomats' daughters. People my lawyers said would be cooperative. And yet you came to me, I said. Because no one else would have made me pay. I stared at him. He continued, voice low. Because I deserve to crawl. Because I wanted to see if I could stand in front of you, after everything I did, and ask for something, knowing you could destroy me with a word. And what did you think I'd say? I didn't know, he said. But I needed to find out if I still meant anything. Even if it was just as the man you hated most. I gripped the edge of the table. You don't understand, I whispered. You didn't just leave. You erased me. You made me feel small. Like I imagined everything we ever had. His voice cracked, barely audible. Because if I admitted it was real, I'd have to admit I was the kind of man who could throw real love away. I stood. I couldn't sit there, couldn't breathe through the pressure in my chest. I hated you, I said. I know. I wanted to destroy you. I expected you to. So why stay? I asked. Why go through this whole year with me if it's just about guilt? He stood too. It's not guilt anymore, he said. It's hope. He stepped toward me, slow and careful. Hope that maybe you'll see the man I'm trying to become. Not for the inheritance. Not for the press. But for you. My throat tightened. I didn't ask you to change. You didn't have to. Silence pulsed between us. Then he said, tell me to leave, and I will. Right now. I looked at him, heart pounding. I could end it here. Shut it all down. Call the lawyers and tear up the contract. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered, what if I don't want you to leave? His breath hitched. I stepped closer. What if I don't want to forgive you? Not yet, but I also don't want to lose this. Then let me stay, he said. Not as your husband. Not as the man who broke you. Just as the one who's still here. And for once, I didn't push him away. That night, we didn't kiss. We just stood there in the dark, closer than we'd ever been, not touching, but not pulling apart either. And that felt more intimate than anything we'd done. In the days that followed, I noticed the little things. He didn't keep a separate room anymore. He started cooking breakfast. Badly. He'd leave notes on my desk. Sometimes business. Sometimes just a scribbled joke or a half-thought compliment he couldn't say aloud. And I started answering them. The wall between us didn't crash down. It eroded. Softly. Quietly. Almost without me realizing. By the end of month 6, I didn't know if I was still winning. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to. I wasn't sure what that meant yet. Only that the final rule, the one I'd planned from the start, was no longer a weapon. It was a question. And if he answered it wrong, it would all still burn. But if he answered it right, I might let him stay. The 7th rule wasn't written on paper. I told him in person. We were on the balcony of the penthouse, the city lights flickering like stars below. It had rained earlier, and everything smelled clean, like the world was starting over. He handed me tea without a word. I took it, heart thudding harder than it should. I want a vow, I said quietly. Ethan turned, brows slightly raised. A vow? Not marriage. Not legal. Just you, telling me something I can hold you to. He studied me like he already knew this was the real test. What kind of vow? That when this year ends, you won't ask for anything more, unless I give it freely. He didn't flinch. And if I do give it, he asked. Then it's because I want to. Not because of a contract. Not because of guilt. Not because of what we used to be. Ethan nodded once. Then I vow it. He said it without hesitation. No dramatic pause. No bargaining. I believed him. That scared me more than anything. Because I was running out of reasons to keep pretending this was still a game. We flew to Santorini that weekend, another press obligation, another round of smiling for the cameras and posing like we were built for each other. I wore white linen and oversized sunglasses. He wore a relaxed button-down and that same watch he'd had since college. We looked like a couple in love. The kind people rooted for. We played our parts well. Until the cameras were gone. That night, we stood barefoot on the villa's terrace, the sea glowing under the moonlight. Ethan said, if I hadn't left back then, what do you think we'd be now? I didn't answer right away. Different people. He nodded. Do you regret this? The arrangement? I regret needing it, I said. But not what came after. He stepped closer. And what came after? You, I said. This version of you. He reached for me, slowly, like I might still vanish. This time, I didn't stop him. His mouth met mine like a promise. There was no audience. No contract. No timing. Just us. I didn't pull away. I let him touch me like I was something breakable and precious all at once. We didn't talk about it afterward. We didn't need to. But I felt it, something fundamental had shifted. We weren't pretending anymore. Back in New York, I found a box in my office. Inside was a key. One of his properties. A lake house upstate I'd once said I loved. There was a note, written in his precise handwriting. When you're ready, meet me there. No demands. No pressure. Just space. Time. He didn't bring it up. He let me have the silence. Let me decide. I didn't go. Not right away. Instead, I started cleaning out my old apartment. The one I hadn't returned to in months. It felt smaller than I remembered. Dustier. Like it belonged to someone else. I found a box of photos. Us. From before. Back when I thought forever meant something. I almost threw them away. But I didn't. The next Thursday, I sat across from him at dinner and said, "You never asked what my final rule is." Ethan looked up. "Is it time?" I nodded. He didn't smile. Didn't tense. Just said, "I'm listening." I took a breath. "At the end of this year, I choose. Not you. Not your lawyers. Not the press. Me." His eyes met mine. "That was always the deal. But now it's more than business." He nodded. "It is. If I walk away, you don't follow. You don't call. You don't send flowers or fly across oceans. And if you stay? Then it's because I finally believe this version of you is the real one. Not just another performance." He didn't hesitate. "I accept." I believed him again. And I hated how much I wanted to stay. Because for all the control I had clawed back, for every rule I'd written, I'd never stopped loving him. That was the truth I hadn't said yet. And soon, it would be his turn to prove that loving me back didn't mean just wanting me, it meant letting me choose. Even if the choice was goodbye. The last month arrived quietly. There was no announcement. No countdown. Just a shift in the air, as if the year we carved from broken promises and carefully written rules had begun to fold in on itself. We stopped pretending. There were still charity galas and photo ops and board meetings. But behind closed doors, we moved like a couple no longer bound by contracts. He reached for my hand without hesitation. I didn't flinch when he touched me. He kissed me in the elevator. I cooked dinner one night, and he burned the garlic bread trying to help. It should have felt safe. It didn't. Because the closer we got, the louder the deadline roared in my head. 1 year. That was the deal. That was what kept me in control. Until I wasn't. We went to the lake house in week 51. I'd held onto the key for 3 weeks before finally using it. He was already there, waiting by the fire, a mug in his hand, looking up like he wasn't sure if I'd come. I stood in the doorway longer than I meant to. Then I said, "You never decorated for the holidays." He looked around. "Didn't know if you'd show." "I'm here." He set the mug down. "Do you want to be?" I didn't answer. Instead, I crossed the room, sat down beside him, and watched the flames dance in the fireplace. He didn't push. Eventually, I whispered, "What happens if I ask you to let me go?" "You already know I will," he said. "And if I don't?" "I'll stay," he said simply. "But only if you ask me to." We sat like that for hours. No promises. No rehearsed lines. Just the weight of almost. When we returned to the city, everything felt louder. The world already writing headlines. Power couple completes their contract year. Will they renew their vows? Rumors. Speculation. Bets placed on our future. But only 2 people knew the truth. It was time. I told him I wanted the final conversation in our library. The same place where the interview had taken place months ago. Where we had smiled for cameras and lied through perfect teeth. This time, it was just us. He stood by the window. I sat in the leather chair by the fireplace. "The lawyers are waiting," he said. I nodded. "The contract ends tomorrow." "I know." Silence stretched. I could have drawn it out. Made it dramatic. Said something cruel or clever or painfully poetic. But I didn't. Instead, I stood. Crossed the space between us. And handed him one final envelope. He opened it with steady fingers. Inside, there was no rule. Just a signature. Mine. On a new agreement. He stared at it, confused. Then read the top line. Addendum, the wife declares this marriage real. He looked up. I whispered, you earned it. He didn't speak. Just wrapped his arms around me and held me like he'd never let go again. I buried my face in his chest. This time, there's no deadline. No conditions. Just us, he said. We never told the press. Never staged another interview. The world could keep guessing. Because the contract was over. But the marriage had finally begun.